we'll be selling this house soon and moving to a tower mansion. You should start looking for a place to live,"
she said with a mocking laugh.
Don't even think you'll receive Dad's inheritance. You understand you'll be renouncing it, right?
My sister approached me with a terrifying look. Her boyfriend was laughing beside her. It's too cruel. Dad's funeral had just ended, and they could still say such things. You guys are the worst. I can't take it anymore. I'll cut ties with you. The moment I shouted, the doorbell rang. Standing there was a familiar-looking man. My name is Emily. I'm 22 and about to graduate from college. Although it feels odd to say this about myself, I have a strong sense of justice and a patient character. From childhood through college, I devotedly and modestly focused on my studies. My grades have always been fairly high, and I have dreams I want to achieve. I'm content with my daily life, but there's also a big concern. That is,
"Emily, come downstairs."
a loud voice came from below. Reluctantly going down, I saw my mother Catherine and my sister Karen. "Mom, Karen, what's up?" I was studying.
Ha, always the bookworm. Even though college is almost over, you're still studying. Must be tough.
That mocking laugh came from my sister. Karen, who looks like our mother, is a beautiful woman with a flashy personality. She used to be a reader model in the past, but now she's unemployed under the name of helping with housework.
"Your sister and I are going shopping, so you do the dishes, laundry, and make sure to iron. We're also out of detergent, so go shopping for that too."
My mother nonchalantly gave me chores to do. Knowing she would get furiously mad if I retorted, I simply replied with a quiet, "Okay." The two of them, dressed up to the nines, left the house in high spirits. Sigh, I have to do it. I muttered to myself as I cleaned up the mess they made. My mother, once crowned as some beauty queen, is a woman of extravagant tastes and a love for luxury. She has always doted on my beautiful sister who resembles her, but she's always ignored plain me. On top of that, she's always pushing household chores and nuisances onto me like I'm a maid. Riding along with that, Karen has also been tormenting me since we were kids. Still, I've tolerated it because they are family after all. Then, my phone rang. The caller ID read Dad. "Hello, Dad? It's been a while." I could hear the cheerfulness in my own voice.
Hi, Emily. It has been. How have you been?
I'm doing well. How about you, Dad? It must be nighttime over there. Thanks for all your hard work.
I wish I could say I'm perfectly fine, but I've been getting headaches lately. I'm planning to see a doctor here. More importantly, how's your studies? Going smoothly?
Dad, please take care of yourself. Thanks to you, everything's going smoothly. I'm studying hard to achieve my dreams.
I knew it. You've always been a hard worker. I always tell you.
To be just and kind, right? Don't worry, I'm doing my best.
That's my Emily. When I come back next time, I'll bring lots of souvenirs.
After such a conversation, we ended the call. To be frank, my family is quite wealthy. This is because my elite father, Tom, has been traveling around the world for work since he was young. Though Dad was often away from home, he was always kind to me and spoiled me a lot when he was around. I always adored my father for that. However, for my mother and sister, Dad was more like an ATM. They lived luxuriously on the money he earned, that's the reality.
Emily, always be just and kind.
My father, who raised me with these words, has always been my pillar of support. That's why I've been able to persevere till now. A few months after this, right after I graduated from college.
"Emily, your father has..."
My mother, looking pale and distressed, burst into the room. Apparently, my father had collapsed at the airport just after returning to the country and had been rushed to the hospital. Hearing this, my mother, sister, and I immediately headed to the hospital where he was taken. There, we found my father lying limp on the bed. The doctor informed us he suffered a stroke. Despite extensive treatment, my father barely recovered. Specifically, he was left with severe motor paralysis and speech impairment, unable to stand or speak coherently. Because my father required care, I decided to put my dreams on hold and dedicated myself to caring for him at home. As expected, my mother and sister practically ignored him, treating him as if he was useless. They neither helped with his care nor even looked at him properly. "Mom, Karen, if you occasionally help with Dad's care, I'm sure it would make him happy." Even when I voiced my concerns, their response was always, "We're busy. We've left taking care of Dad up to you," in that dismissive manner. "Dad, it's a beautiful day today."
Emily, thank you.
I studied about caregiving. I opened the curtains so he could see outside, fed him specialized food, and arranged fresh flowers every day. I provided care with all my heart, even with the help of caregivers. My father, who had worked hard for us and always showed his affection. I was desperate to do my best for him. When things got tough, I remembered his words. "Emily, always be kind and do the right thing." Remembering those words gave me the strength to push on. Then, one day, I overheard my mother and sister talking secretly at home. "Thanks to Dad's insurance money, I could buy that bag I wanted," said my mother.
It's like a thank you from Dad. Maybe I should get a new wallet too?
My sister added. Trying to contain my rising anger, I kept listening, only to hear my mother make an even more shocking remark.
If he passes away, the death insurance and inheritance will bring in hundreds of millions. He saved not just from his job but also from investments.
Really? Mom, we should buy a luxury condo then. And maybe my boyfriend, Al, can live with us. I just wish Dad would pass away soon.
Hey, yes, indeed.
I couldn't bear to listen any longer and left the room. My father was fighting hard to stay alive. And yet, they were talking about splurging with the insurance money and buying a luxury condo with the inheritance? Wishing for his early death? Overwhelmed by anger and pity, I felt nauseous. In reality, my mother and sister recently began to flaunt their wealth even more, buying luxury brand items and even going on overseas trips, leaving my father and me behind. However, I couldn't possibly share this with my already burdened father. I didn't want to sadden him. Pretending I hadn't heard my mother and sister's conversation, I continued to devote myself to caring for my father. Friends and acquaintances often visited him, showing their affection and concern. I distinctly remember an older gentleman dressed in a suit and glasses who frequently came by. I wasn't around when they talked, but he was probably an executive or some high-ranking official from my father's company. Whenever he saw me, he would bow and greet me. It made me happy to see my father being so respected, and visits like these always seemed to brighten up my father's mood. I thought such days would continue. However, a few months later, my father had a recurrent stroke and passed away suddenly. "Dad! Dad!" I clung to my father's lifeless body and cried uncontrollably. At this moment, both my mother and sister shed tears, mourning the loss of our father. What followed was a whirlwind of events. I had to organize the wake and funeral. Even though my mother was the primary mourner, she didn't do anything, and neither did my sister. In the end, I had to handle all the procedures by myself, running around frantically, overwhelmed by the tasks. The wake concluded, and a large number of people attended the funeral. Many flowers were also delivered. I felt comforted realizing the respect and love people held for my father during his life. At the funeral, the sounds of muffled crying filled the air, and my father, with a peaceful expression, embarked on his final journey. After the seventh-day memorial service, in the evening, I was beginning to recover slightly from my grief. As I was cleaning up after the memorial service, my mother and sister called me to the living room. Next to my sister was a man, apparently her fiancé. He looked decent just like my sister, but his past as a nightclub host was evident from the superficiality that seeped through. Apparently, his name was Albert, but my mother and sister affectionately called him Al.
"So, about Dad's inheritance."
My mother began. I had a terrible feeling about this. My mother continued, laughing mockingly as she said something outrageous.
"You see, we should be getting a lot from Dad's inheritance. Once we have it, we'll sell this house and move into a tower mansion. So, you should start looking for another place to live."
Mom, it's only been a week since Dad passed away. Are you already thinking about the inheritance? And what's this about a tower mansion?
Stop whining. We've already signed the contract. It's a brand new unit, and it's on one of the top floors.
You've already signed? When did this happen?
I don't know, about a month ago.
A month ago? Dad was still healthy then.
Huh, he was on his deathbed. With all the money Dad had, we can do whatever we want.
My mother was the epitome of selfishness, and my sister followed suit.
Exactly. In the tower mansion, it'll be Mom, me, and Al. You're just in the way. Why don't you go find some rundown apartment?
Even you, sis? Are you serious?
Of course, don't even think about receiving any of Dad's inheritance. You'll renounce your inheritance rights, got it?
My sister glared menacingly at me. Beside me, my sister's fiancé, Al, was laughing. A smiling portrait of my father caught the corner of my eye, making me feel suffocated. This was beyond cruel. How could they say such things when we haven't even finished mourning our father's death? You're the worst. I can't stand you anymore. I'm cutting ties with all of you.
Huh, if you sever ties with us, it'd be a relief on our end.
My mother and sister laughed at me. I clenched my fist, trembling. Just then, the doorbell rang. Thinking it might be someone paying their condolences, I composed myself, wiped away my tears, and opened the door. And then,
Good evening. My condolences for your loss.
at the entrance, bowing deeply, was the middle-aged man in a suit and glasses, who had often visited my father during his illness. Thank you. Please come in. As I invited him in, the man handed me his business card.
Please check this. I am Attorney Smith, appointed by Mr. Tom.
I examined the card. It indeed was from a law firm. I hadn't noticed earlier, but he had an attorney badge shining on his chest. My father's lawyer. As I was in shock, my mother, sister, and sister's boyfriend began to gather behind me.
Huh, what does a lawyer want?
Smith then addressed my mother, who had a puzzled look on her face.
I am here to discuss matters related to the inheritance. Is now a good time?
In the living room, Smith took a seat, with my mother directly in front of him. My sister and her boyfriend sat beside her. I found myself seated across from them. Smith took out several documents from his bag, surveyed all of us, and then began to speak slowly.
First, would it be all right if I read out the will?
How could he have such a thing when he could barely move or speak towards the end? Just get on with it.
Catherine spoke, sounding irritated.
I will now read it out.
Smith said in a calm voice.
Last will and testament. I, Tom Johnson, hereby declare the following as my last will. I bequeath all of my properties and belongings to my younger daughter, Emily.
A moment of silence ensued.
The testator designates the following individual as the executor of the will.
As Smith continued reading, Karen interrupted him.
Wait, what did you just say?
Did you not hear me? The testator designates the executor as.
No, not that. What you said before.
I'll read it again then. I, the testator, bequeath all of my properties and belongings to my younger daughter, Emily.
What does that mean? So you're saying, what?
The next person to shriek was their mother.
In essence, Emily is to inherit the entirety of the estate.
What?
I was so taken aback she could only widen her eyes in shock.
Next, I will read the additional notes in the will.
Smith continued, looking at me.
These additional notes can be understood as your father's final message.
I listened in silence.
Emily, you sacrificed your precious dreams to take care of me. Despite me being preoccupied with work and hardly paying attention to you, I truly thank you. Because of you, I was able to pass away peacefully and fulfilled.
Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened to the words my father left behind from Mr. Smith.
Emily, always be righteous and kind. I believe you can do that. I'll always be watching over you. Please be happy.
In front of me, who could only sob, my mother and sister were in complete disarray.
Wait a minute. What does this mean? All of the inheritance is going to her.
Exactly. What about our money?
Smith glanced at the two of them and spoke.
There's no mention of you two. By the way, Emily is also the sole beneficiary of the life insurance.
What are you talking about? Do you think that's acceptable?
My mother's face turned beet red, as if she was about to foam at the mouth.
Isn't there something called legitimate portion? Shouldn't a spouse or child be guaranteed a share?
My older sister leaned forward.
You're talking about the reserved portion of the inheritance. Indeed, both of you have the right to claim your rightful share from Emily.
Smith stated calmly.
Well, obviously.
My mother seemed to be returning to her usual self.
Even with a will, if the distribution is unequal, you can claim the inheritance defined by the Civil Code. However,
Smith continued.
Tom had asked us to investigate how his wife, Catherine, and eldest daughter, Karen, were squandering his money on legacies and misusing the insurance money.
Shock was evident in the eyes of my mother and sister.
In fact, purchases such as luxury condos and cars were made, and there was excessive spending on things like host clubs and overseas trips. Emily alone was left to care for him and handle household chores. Moreover, there were statements wishing for Tom's death.
My father knew everything. He pretended not to know despite being aware.
That's...
Smith quietly interrupted my stammering mother.
In this case, the distribution of the inheritance cannot be deemed unfair. Even if you were to sue, it's unlikely you would receive anything. If you still want to pursue it, go ahead. I'll be ready to face you in court.
My mother's face had turned pale blue.
This is absurd.
My sister muttered, "It's ridiculous," all to Emily alone. As Smith was leaving and I escorted him to the entrance, he said something.
Emily, you've grown so admirably. Your father always spoke of you with joy in his eyes.
Is that so? My father.
I've known your father since our younger days, and he entrusted me with this task. He used to say that he might have been too lenient with those two. But he must be relieved knowing how wonderfully you've grown up.
With Smith's narrowed eyes, I felt overwhelmed and tears welled up again.
Please, be happy from now on. Remember, I'm always here to support you.
I kept bowing deeply to Smith, who left me with those words. A year later, with Smith's assistance, I was able to inherit all of my father's assets. As for my mother and sister, my mother couldn't repay the contracts for the luxury condo, expensive cars, and brand items, eventually leading her to declare bankruptcy. My sister, on the other hand, was quickly left by her boyfriend when he found out she wouldn't get any inheritance. I heard through the grapevine that she now lives in an old apartment with our mother. For a while, they tried calling me, but I kept deflecting, saying, "We're estranged. Please contact my lawyer." I believed that's what my father would have wanted. Now, there's no contact from them at all. As for me, I utilized my father's inheritance to attend the law school I had once given up on. Initially, I intended to uphold my father's words, always be righteous and kind, and aimed to become a prosecutor after becoming a judicial official. But now, my dreams have changed. After interacting with Smith, who rescued me during my crisis and supported me through and through, I've grown fond of the profession of being a lawyer. That's why I'm now rigorously studying to become a lawyer. I strongly hope to someday become a righteous and compassionate lawyer, just like Smith.